Daniel moved through the alien bazaar. The air heavy with strange smells and sharp sounds, bright stalls lined both sides of the narrow street. Their owners shouting prices in languages he barely understood. Some sold fruits that glowed under the hot suns, others displayed weapons with edges that shimmered like fire. But in the far corner, away from the busy crowd, he noticed something different. A small metal cage stood half hidden under a dirty piece of cloth. The cloth twitched, and a weak cough came from inside. Daniel slowed his steps, feeling a pull in his chest. He didn't usually stop for trouble, and whatever was in that cage looked like trouble. The stall owner was a thick-skinned alien with yellow eyes that never blinked. He leaned against the cage, lazily chewing on something. "Not for you, human," the alien said in broken trade language. "This one is already marked." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Marked for what?" The alien grinned, showing teeth like broken glass. For meat, Daniel's stomach turned, but he kept his face still. He'd heard rumors before. Some alien worlds considered certain species a delicacy. But hearing it up close made the blood in his veins feel cold. The cloth moved again, and a pair of large eyes looked at him from the shadows. They were not the eyes of an animal. They were full of fear, pain, and a strange kind of hope. The shape inside shifted, and he could see more now. A thin figure, small frame, wrists bound with metal cuffs. The skin was pale, almost silver under the dim market light, and her hair, tangled and dirty, fell across her face, sold for meat. "Human," she whispered, her voice dry and shaking. "Hold me, use me. Just get me out of here." Daniel froze, the noise of the market fading to silence in his mind. It wasn't just fear in her voice. It was the sound of someone already standing. At the edge of death, every instinct told him to walk away, to avoid becoming part of this nightmare, but his feet refused to move. He crouched by the cage, speaking low so the crowd wouldn't hear. "What's your name?" he asked. She blinked slowly, as if even answering was too much effort. "Kari." Her lips trembled around the word. Daniel looked up at the seller, his voice hard. "How much?" The alien laughed. "She is cheap, human, worthless to me. Alive, only good for eating." He named a price so low it made Daniel's chest tighten. It wasn't the price that mattered. It was the way the alien looked at her like she was nothing. A few other aliens nearby had stopped to watch. They whispered and grinned, some betting on whether the human would actually buy her. "Maybe he likes them weak," one said in his own tongue. Earning laughter, Daniel ignored them, pulling out his credit chip. "I'll take her," he said flatly. The alien seller tilted his head. "Why?" "You can't breed her. She is too damaged to work." Daniel's jaw clenched. "I said, I'll take her." The alien shrugged, swiping the chip and tossing him a small control key for the cage. "Your problem now," he said, with a cruel smile. Daniel knelt and unlocked the cage door. Kari hesitated, her eyes darting to the crowd like she expected someone to stop her. "Come on," he said quietly. She moved slowly, every step shaky, her thin legs almost giving way when she reached him. She stumbled, and he caught her before she could fall. Her body was so light in his arms it felt like holding air. She pressed her face into his chest, her cold hands clutching his shirt. The smell of dirt and fear clung to her, but he didn't let go. The crowd's murmurs followed them as they walked away. Some called after him, mocking the human who paid for scrap meat. Others just stared, confused. The seller's voice rose above them all. "You'll regret it, human." Daniel didn't look back. He tightened his hold on Kari, feeling the way she trembled against him, whatever danger this brought. He knew one thing. He wasn't leaving her here, and whoever wanted her for meat would have to come through. Him first. Daniel's arms ached from carrying Kari through the narrow, crowded streets. The bazaar's noise faded behind them, replaced by the low hum of the city's transport lines overhead. She didn't speak, her head resting weakly against his shoulder, her breathing shallow. Every few seconds, her eyes flicked open, scanning the people around them as if expecting someone to grab her back. Daniel noticed, and his steps quickened. He turned into a quieter alley. Leaning against a wall to catch his breath, "You can walk?" he asked softly. Kari's fingers tightened on his coat, her head shaking slowly. "All right," he murmured, shifting her weight in his arms. Her lightness was worrying. She felt too fragile, like she might vanish if he let go for even a second. A voice called from behind, sharp and mocking. "Hey, human." Daniel turned his head slightly, seeing two tall aliens approach, their skin patterned with red streaks. They glanced at Kari, then at him, grinning. "Thought we saw you buy that thing," one of them said. "You overpaid. I'll give you half your credits if you hand her over." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Not for sale." The second alien laughed. "You'll change your mind. She's marked. You can't keep marked property in this sector without trouble." Daniel didn't answer, just stepped sideways to block them from getting closer. Kari's grip on his shirt tightened until her knuckles turned white. The first alien's grin faded, replaced with a sharp sneer. "Fine. Don't say we didn't warn you," he said before the two walked away, their voices carrying down the alley. Daniel waited until their footsteps vanished before moving again. He reached a side market, smaller, quieter, the kind of place traders went to make deals away from. The eyes of the main bazaar, an old cloth vendor waved him over. Recognizing him, "Daniel, you look like trouble," the vendor said, his eyes shifting to Kari. "Who's that?" "No one you know," Daniel replied, keeping his voice low. "I need something for her." "Clothes, maybe food?" The vendor hesitated. "If she's marked, I can't. She's not meat anymore." Daniel cut in, his voice firm. "She's with me." The vendor studied him for a moment, then nodded, disappearing into the back of his stall. He returned with a long, worn coat and a small bag of bread-like rolls wrapped in paper. "On the house," he said quietly. "But you didn't get them from me." Daniel gave a short nod of thanks, wrapping the coat around Kari's shoulders. She didn't speak, but her eyes lingered on the bread in his hand. He broke off a piece and held it to her. Her hands trembled as she took it, eating slowly, like she was afraid it would be taken away as they moved on. Daniel's mind kept replaying the moment. At the cage, that voice, the quiet, desperate plea, it wasn't something he could forget. He didn't know why he had acted so quickly. Maybe it was the way she looked at him, or maybe it was the simple fact that no one else would. The streets began to open up toward the edge of the trade district. A transport hub buzzed with the noise of ships coming and going. Daniel knew he couldn't take her straight to his ship. Too many eyes here, too many questions. He needed somewhere safer first. Somewhere to figure out his next move. "Do you trust me?" he asked suddenly, glancing down at Kari. Her eyes met his for a moment before she looked away. "I don't know," she said softly. "No one's ever given me a reason to." He nodded slightly. "Fair enough, but I'm getting you out of here." "That's a start." They passed a row of low buildings, their walls covered in faded trade posters. Daniel spotted a narrow metal staircase between them and turned down it. At the bottom was a small door marked with a symbol most outsiders wouldn't recognize. It led to a storage unit used by smugglers and off-world traders. Inside, the air was cool and still, lit by a single hanging light. Daniel set Kari down on a crate, crouching in front of her. "You need to tell me if anyone's going to come." "After you," he said. Kari's eyes lowered, her fingers twisting the edge of the coat. "They always come," she whispered, "when you're marked. You belong to them until you're dead." Daniel's stomach turned, but he kept his voice steady. "Not anymore." She looked up at him then, her eyes holding something between disbelief and hope. He knew that look. It was the same one he'd seen on refugees during the war, the look of someone who wanted to believe, but had been betrayed too many times. A faint sound outside made him pause. Footsteps, slow and heavy. Coming down the stairs, Daniel's hand moved to the pistol at his belt. Kari froze, every muscle tensing. The door creaked open, and a shadow fell across the floor. "Daniel," a voice said from the doorway, low and familiar. "We need to talk." Daniel didn't lower his pistol right away. The figure at the door stepped into the dim light, revealing a tall alien with dark green skin and deep-set eyes. It was Rin, a contact Daniel had dealt with before, a smuggler who owed him a few favors. Rin glanced at Kari, then back at Daniel, his brow furrowing. "You've stepped into something dangerous," he said, voice calm but edged with warning. Daniel didn't answer, just motioned for him to shut the door. Rin did so, leaning against it, the words already out. He continued, "You bought a marked one. And not just any mark. She belonged to the Crimson Teeth Gang." Daniel felt Kari stiffen beside him. Her eyes dropped to the floor, and her voice was barely above a whisper. "They'll come." Daniel gave a slow nod. "Then we need to move now." Rin shook his head. "The streets are crawling with their lookouts. And the bounty on her just doubled. They're saying she's stolen property." Daniel's grip tightened on his pistol. "She's not property." Rin smirked slightly. "Try telling them that." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If you want to get her out of this city, you need to move fast and quiet. I can show you a way through the underpaths, but once we're in, there's no turning back." Kari's eyes lifted to Daniel's face, silently asking the question she didn't dare speak. He looked at her for a moment, then gave a short nod. To Rin, "Lead the way." They left through a back exit, Rin moving ahead, Daniel keeping Kari close behind him. The underpaths were a maze of old service tunnels running beneath the city. The walls were damp, covered in patches of glowing moss, and the air smelled faintly of rust. Every sound seemed to echo the drip of water, the scuttle of small creatures, the faint hum of distant machinery. Kari stayed close, her hand gripping the back of Daniel's coat at one turn. They heard voices ahead, two gang members leaning against a wall, weapons slung over their shoulders. Rin gestured for them to wait, then slipped forward quietly. Pulling a small device from his belt, there was a sharp flash of light, and both gang members collapsed without a sound. "Stunburst," Rin explained as he waved them forward. "We keep moving." They climbed a narrow stairwell that led up into an abandoned warehouse through the dusty windows. Daniel could see the upper city, bright signs, fast-moving hovercraft, and, in the distance, the towering spire of the spaceport. "That's our exit," Rin said, pointing, "but it's going to be tricky. They'll expect you to try for the docks." A sudden crash echoed from the far side of the warehouse. Daniel turned just in time to see a gang of Crimson Teeth pour in through a broken wall panel, their leader's red-inked face standing out in the gloom. "There." The leader barked, pointing straight at Kari. "Don't let her get away." Daniel shoved Kari behind a stack of crates, drawing his pistol. Blaster fire lit up the dark space, burning holes into the walls. Rin ducked behind cover, firing. Back with his own weapon, the gang pushed forward, their footsteps thudding across the cracked floor. Daniel knew they couldn't win a drawn-out fight. "Kari," he called, "when I say run, you run. Don't stop until you see daylight." Her voice trembled. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you," he said, even though he wasn't sure it was true. He fired a quick burst toward the gang's left flank, forcing them to duck. "Now?" he shouted. Kari bolted from cover, sprinting toward the far exit, her bare feet slapping the dusty floor. Rin covered her from behind, hitting two of the gang before they could react. Daniel followed, but the gang leader lunged at him. Knocking the pistol from his hand, the two crashed into a crate, sending it splintering to the ground. The leader snarled, trying to pin Daniel, but Daniel drove an elbow into his jaw and shoved him away. He grabbed his pistol and ran, the shouts of the gang echoing behind him. Kari was waiting at the door, eyes wide, her chest heaving. Daniel grabbed her hand, pulling her into the street. They didn't slow down, weaving through the crowded walkway as shouts followed them. Rin caught up, his face grim. "We've got one more shot at this. Follow me." He led them into a narrow passage between two high buildings. At the end was a maintenance lift, barely big enough for the three of them. Rin slammed the control, and the lift groaned to life, rising toward the rooftops. Below, Daniel could see gang members pushing through the crowd. Pointing upward, Kari clung to him, her breath uneven. Daniel kept his eyes on the sky above, where the faint outline of ships passed under the glow of the city's force shields. They weren't safe yet, but they were one step closer. The lift rattled to a stop at the top of a flat, metal-roofed building. Rin stepped out first. Scanning the skyline, the city stretched out in all directions, towers of glass and steel lit by neon. Sky lanes buzzing with craft, and far in the distance, the shadow of the spaceport under the shielded dome. Daniel guided Kari forward, feeling her legs shake with each step. Her breathing was still shallow, but she hadn't let go of his hand. "This way," Rin said, leading them to a hatch hidden behind a rusted vent. He pulled it open, revealing a narrow stairwell that led down into darkness. Daniel motioned for Kari to go first, keeping close behind her while Rin closed the hatch above. The air grew cooler as they descended, the noise of the city fading to a distant hum. At the bottom, the stairwell opened into a wide underground room lit by a few dim lamps. Crates were stacked along the walls, and a small table sat in the center, scattered with maps, ration packs, and old devices. "This is one of my safe houses," Rin said. "Not many know about it, and no one will find you here without my help." Daniel helped Kari to a small cot in the corner. She sat slowly, wrapping the oversized coat tighter around herself, her eyes flicking from Rin to Daniel. "This place is safe?" she asked softly. "For now," Daniel said, kneeling beside her. "You need to rest." Rin crossed his arms, leaning against the wall. "You've got a problem, Daniel," he said. "That girl isn't just marked property. She's a prize to them. Taking her puts you on their kill list." Daniel met his gaze. "I don't care. I'm not handing her back." Rin studied him for a moment, then let out a slow sigh. "You always were stubborn." Kari stayed quiet, but her eyes moved between them. Her voice finally broke the silence. "They killed my clan," she said, each word heavy, "sold the survivors. Most didn't last long." She paused, her fingers twisting the edge of the coat. "I was sold to one of their buyers. When they got tired of me, they marked me for meat." Daniel's hands clenched unconsciously. He'd seen cruelty before. But there was something about her calm, matter-of-fact tone that made his chest tighten. "You're not meat," he said quietly. Her eyes met his for the first time in minutes, and there was a faint flicker there, something that might have been hope. Rin dropped a small ration pack onto the cot beside her. "Eat," he said simply. "You'll need your strength." Kari nodded and began to eat slowly, as if testing whether it was real. Daniel walked to the table, lowering his voice so Kari wouldn't hear. "What's our best way off-world?" Rin shook his head. "The docks are watched, the main ports are locked down. And every patrol's got your description already." Daniel frowned. "What about the cargo lifts on the east side?" "Too risky," Rin said. "But there's an old service tunnel that leads to a private hangar, belongs to a friend who owes me." Daniel glanced back at Kari, who was finishing her food. "How long to get there?" he asked. 2 hours on foot if we move fast," Rin replied, "but once we're in the open, it's going to get dangerous." A faint thump sounded from somewhere above them. Rin's head snapped up. Daniel reached for his pistol, his senses on high alert. The thump came again, heavier this time. followed by the faint scrape of boots on metal. "They found us," Rin said under his breath. Kari froze on the cot, her eyes wide. Daniel moved to her side. "We have to go." She didn't argue, sliding off the cot and gripping his arm for support. Rin was already moving toward a secondary exit, a narrow door at the back of the room. "This way. They'll try to breach from above, so we take the underpass," he said. A sudden crash shook the room, dust falling from the ceiling. Voices shouted above, muffled but urgent. Daniel didn't look back. He pushed Kari through the door, Rin right behind them. The narrow tunnel beyond was barely lit, the floor uneven under their feet. Daniel kept one hand on Kari's back, urging her forward. The sound of boots echoed behind them. Growing louder, they reached a rusted ladder leading upward. Rin climbed first, checking the hatch at the top. "It's clear for now," he called down. Daniel helped Kari up before following, his pistol ready when he emerged. They were in the shadow of a wide industrial yard, containers stacked high, machinery silent in the night. The air smelled faintly of oil and metal. "This isn't far from the east sector," Rin said, glancing around. "If we keep moving, we can reach the hangar before they cut us off." Daniel looked at Kari. She was breathing hard, but her eyes were steady. "Stay close," he told her. She gave a small nod, her hand tightening on his sleeve, and together, under the cover of the silent yard, they began moving toward the promise of escape, even as the danger behind them closed in. The night air in the industrial yard felt heavy. Every sound, the faint creak of metal, the distant hum of a power line, seemed sharper. Daniel kept Kari close on his left, Rin ahead of them. Moving quickly between the towering stacks of containers, they didn't speak. Their footsteps barely more than whispers against the concrete. Then came the sound Daniel didn't want to hear: boots. Many of them, pounding the ground. Shadows moved at the far edge of the yard, the shapes of armed figures slipping between the stacks. "They've split up," Rin muttered, glancing over his shoulder. "They're trying to box us in." Daniel's mind worked fast. They couldn't outgun the Crimson Teeth here, not in open space. They needed cover, confusion, a way to break the gang's line of sight. He spotted a row of cargo haulers parked in the shadows, their large frames blocking a service road. "This way," he whispered to Rin, steering Kari toward them. They ducked under the nearest hauler, crouching low. Kari's breaths came fast, but she kept silent, her small frame pressed close to Daniel's side. Through the gaps between the hauler's wheels, Daniel could see the gang moving, their weapons ready. A voice called out, harsh and close, "Find the girl, the human. Dies if you see him." Rin tapped Daniel's arm, pointing toward a narrow maintenance ramp that led upward along the side of a warehouse. It was risky. High ground made them visible, but it also led toward the east sector. Daniel nodded, waiting for the moment the gang's patrol turned their backs. When it came, he pulled Kari forward, and the three of them sprinted for the ramp. Halfway up, shouts erupted behind them. A blaster bolt slammed into the metal railing, sending sparks into the dark. "Run!" Daniel urged, his voice low but firm. Kari pushed herself faster, her bare feet light against the steel. They reached the top and slipped inside through a side door, entering a long corridor that smelled of dust and engine oil. Inside, the noise of the city returned faintly, carried through vents and thin walls. They passed rows of empty workbenches, old machinery covered in tarps. "This building connects to the old tram lines," Rin said quickly. "We can use them to get closer to the hangar without being seen." They moved deeper until they reached a grated stairwell. Rin led the way down. But just as Daniel was about to follow, the sound of heavy boots echoed from below. Kari's eyes widened. "They're coming up," she whispered. Daniel scanned quickly, spotting a side hatch halfway down the stairs. He yanked it open, revealing a dark storage space lined with rusted tools and crates. In he ordered, pushing Kari inside. Then, slipping in behind her, Rin ducked in last, closing the hatch just as the gang's footsteps reached the landing outside. They waited in silence, the dim light from a single cracked bulb casting long shadows. Through the thin metal of the hatch, Daniel could hear the gang talking. "Check the tram tunnels. Spread out." The girl's worth more alive. His grip on the pistol tightened, his other hand resting lightly on Carrie's shoulder. She didn't flinch, but she was trembling. The voices moved away, the footsteps fading into the distance. Rin let out a slow breath. "We can't stay here. We move now before they loop back." Daniel nodded, guiding Kari toward a rear door in the storage room. It opened onto a narrow walkway suspended above an empty tram tunnel. The tracks below stretched off into darkness, the walls streaked with moisture. They began to move along the walkway, their footsteps soft on the metal grating. Kari stayed close, but Daniel could tell she was growing tired, her steps slowing, her grip on his sleeve tightening. He leaned closer, speaking, just loud enough for her to hear. "We're almost there." She gave the faintest nod, but her eyes told him she was forcing herself to keep going. A sudden flash lit up the tunnel ahead, followed by the sharp hiss of a blaster shot. Daniel reacted instantly, pulling Kari behind a support beam as another shot rang out. Figures emerged from the shadows ahead, more crimson teeth, their leader barking orders. "They've got us from both sides," Rin hissed. Glancing back toward the far end of the walkway, Daniel's mind raced, trapped in the middle of a narrow metal path. Nowhere to run, he spotted an old maintenance ladder bolted to the tunnel wall, leading down to the track level. It wasn't much, but it was a way out, down. He ordered, pushing Kari toward it. She climbed quickly, Daniel close behind, Rin covering them with quick bursts of return. Fire! They dropped to the tunnel floor just as the gang reached the walkway above, their shots sparking off the ground near them. "Move!" Daniel barked, leading Kari into the darkness of the tunnel. The gang shouted above, their footsteps pounding as they tried to keep up along the upper level. The tunnel curved sharply, and for the first time in minutes, they were out of the gangs direct line of fire. Rin caught up, breathing hard. "We keep pushing east," he said. "We're close to the hangar entrance, maybe 10 minutes if we don't get slowed down." Daniel glanced at Kari. She was pale, but her eyes were fixed forward. She wasn't giving up. Oh, and neither was he. They didn't know if they'd make it to the hangar without another fight. But one thing was certain, they wouldn't stop running until they were free. The tunnel ended in a heavy service door marked with faded warning symbols. Rin pressed his palm to an old scanner beside it, and with a reluctant hiss, the door unlocked. Cool night air rushed in. Carrying the distant roar of engines, Daniel stepped out first, scanning the wide expanse ahead. They were at the far edge of the east sector's docks, a sprawling area of landing pads, cargo cranes, and small private hangars. Neon lights glowed overhead, reflecting off the slick metal surfaces. In the distance, Daniel could see the outline of a small freighter, their way off this cursed planet. Rin's voice was low. "That's the one. We just have to get there." Daniel didn't like the way he said "just," but there was no time to argue. He motioned for Kari to stay between them, and they began moving fast across the open space. Every step felt too loud, every shadow a possible threat. Halfway to the ship, the sound came, the deep, heavy thud of boots hitting the metal ground from between the containers. A wave of crimson teeth poured out, their red tattoos bright under the dock lights. At the front was their leader, his jagged grin aimed straight at Daniel. "You think you can steal from us and walk away, human?" he shouted. He pointed his weapon toward Kari. "Hand her over, and maybe I'll let you die quick." Daniel stepped in front of Kari, his pistol steady. "She's not yours," he said flatly. The leader laughed, the sound harsh and echoing. "Everything here is ours. The gang spread out, forming a wide half circle. Cutting off their path to the freighter, behind Daniel, Rin muttered, "We're outnumbered. I've noticed." Daniel replied, his eyes never leaving the leader, Kari's. Voice came from behind him, small but steady. "They'll never stop. Not until one of us is gone." Daniel glanced at her. She was pale, but her eyes burned with something fierce. He knew she was right. Running again would only delay the fight, and maybe not give them another chance. The leader gave a signal, and the gang began to advance, weapons ready. Daniel took the first shot. Clean hit that dropped one of them instantly. The docks exploded into chaos, blaster fire lighting the air. The smell of scorched metal filling their lungs. Rin fired from behind a cargo crate, his aim sharp, forcing the gang to scatter. Daniel stayed in front of Kari, using the crates for cover, returning fire with precision. The leader moved fast, closing the distance. His blade flashing in the dock lights. Daniel met him head-on, their weapons clashing. Kari crouched behind a container, her eyes darting between Daniel and the gang members flanking from the side. One of them broke off toward her. She froze for a moment, then grabbed a fallen blaster from the ground. Her hands shook. But she aimed and fired the shot, hitting the attacker square in the chest. Daniel caught the movement out of the corner of his eye. "Good shot," he shouted, blocking the leader's next strike. The fight turned brutal. Fists, blades, and close-range shots exchanged in a flurry of motion. Rin took down two more before a bolt grazed his shoulder, forcing him to fall back. Daniel was bleeding from a cut across his arm, but he didn't slow. With a sharp move, he slammed the leader against a cargo crate, knocking his weapon away. "This ends now." Daniel growled. The leader spat blood and lunged again. But Daniel's shot hit him clean, dropping him to the dock floor. The remaining gang members hesitated, their leader gone. Rin took the chance to fire warning shots into the air, shouting, "Run, or you're next." They broke, scattering into the shadows of the docks. Daniel turned to Kari, breathing hard. She was still holding the blaster, her eyes locked on his. "You're safe now," he said, his voice rough but certain. Her lips trembled, and she lowered the weapon, stepping toward him. Rin clutched his shoulder but managed to grin. "We'd better move before someone else decides to claim the bounty." Daniel nodded, guiding Kari toward the freighter. They boarded quickly, the ship's engines humming to life. As the landing pad doors opened, the cold stars stretched before them. Kari sank into a seat, still shaking. Daniel sat beside her, his arm resting lightly across her shoulders. She whispered, "You didn't have to do this." "But you did." Daniel met her gaze. "You're not theirs. Not ever again." The freighter lifted, leaving the docks and the crimson teeth far below. But Daniel knew the fight wasn't truly over. It was only the beginning of whatever came next. The freighter's engines purred steadily as it rose through the planet's thick atmosphere. Beyond the cockpit glass, the stars spread across the black like endless fireflies. For the first time in hours, there were no shouts, no blaster fire, no pounding footsteps, only the quiet hum of flight. Daniel stayed in the co-pilot's seat, his hands resting loosely on the controls while Rin set the ship on autopilot. Kari sat opposite him, curled into the oversized coat he'd given her silver hair catching the faint cabin light. She looked small in the wide chair, but there was something different about her now. Her shoulders weren't as tense, her eyes didn't dart to every shadow. The fear was still there, but it was no longer the only thing. Rin broke the silence first. "We'll be clear of their patrol range in 20 minutes. After that, they'll have to work a lot harder to find you." Daniel gave a short nod, his gaze still on Kari. She was staring out at the stars, almost like she was afraid they might disappear if she blinked. After a while, she spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "When they took me, I thought I'd never see this again, she said. Gesturing to the stars, I thought my story would end in a cage. Or, worse, Daniel leaned back, not while I'm breathing. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, but it faded quickly. They'll still hunt me, she said. The crimson teeth don't let things go. You could leave me at the next safe. World, they might not follow you then. Daniel shook his head. Kari, you're not cargo, I'm dropping off. You're a person, and you're free now. We'll deal with whatever comes. Her eyes searched his, looking for any sign he didn't mean it. But all she saw was the same steady resolve he'd had since the moment he opened her cage. She let out a slow breath, her fingers tightening around the coat. Then, I owe you my life, she said softly. I don't know how to repay that. You already have, Daniel said, his voice low. Back at the docks, you saved me from the one trying to flank me. You didn't freeze. You fought Kari's. Eyes flickered, part disbelief, part pride, and for the first time. She didn't look away from him, Rin, still nursing his shoulder wound. Smirked from the pilot's seat. Looks like you two are stuck with each other, he said. And, for the record, I don't do charity runs. Daniel, you owe me a drink. Or 5. Daniel managed a faint grin. Put it on my tab, the ship's console chimed, signaling they'd cleared the planet's gravity well. Rin switched the nav system to long range, locking in a jump toward a neutral system. Outside, the stars began to stretch into lines as the jump drive powered up. Kari turned back to the window, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know where I belong anymore, she said. My clan is gone. My home. It's gone too. Daniel hesitated for a moment, then said, Then we'll find you a new one. Or you can stay with me if you want. Her head turned toward him slowly, the faintest spark in her eyes. You'd let me stay, Slong? As you want, he replied without hesitation. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood and crossed the small space between them, her bare feet silent on the metal floor. She placed her hand lightly over his, her touch warm despite the chill of space. Then I'll stay, she said, and for the first time. The weight in her voice was gone. The console's light shifted as the jump engaged. The stars outside blurred, the freighter slipping into the smooth, endless tunnel of hyperspace. Kari kept her hand in his. Her eyes forward, she didn't know where the next journey would take them, but for the first time in years, the future didn't feel like a death sentence. Daniel leaned back, his grip steady. He knew there would be more danger ahead, more battles to fight, but as long as she was safe beside him, it was a fight he was ready for. Rin muttered from the cockpit. Next stop, anywhere but here. Daniel and Kari shared a glance, and she smiled, a real smile. Small but unshakable. The kind of smile that meant hope had found its way back. And somewhere, far behind them, on a world they would never return to, a cage sat empty under a dirty cloth and would never hold her again.